Serotonin is one type of monoamine. Development is plastic, so human traits can be molded just like plastic can be. That's where the name comes from. Yet people maintain a certain durability of identity, as plastic does. So that's basically like saying that however we're born is not necessarily going to dictate how we're going to be for the rest of our lives. We can change, although there are also going to be certain consistencies across how we are as children and how we are as adults and how we are as older adults. So there's both this consistency or durability in identity as well as a certain amount of plasticity or malleability. An interesting finding that's relatively recent relating to neuroscience is the discovery of these certain brain cells called mirror neurons. These are cells in an observer's brain that respond to an action performed by someone else in the same way they would if the observer had actually performed that action. Now, what that basically means is that if you watch me pick up a pencil, there are these neurons in your brain called mirror neurons that will fire or become activated the same way that they would become activated if it had been you that picked up that same pencil. In other words, watching me pick up a pencil activates the same neurons in your brain as would become activated if you had actually picked up the pencil yourself. And there's been a lot of research into the way that we learn and how it relates to the identification of these mirror neurons, because a lot of times the way that we learn is by watching other people do things. We're going to be talking about a number of different theories of human development. A developmental theory, a scientific theory in general, is a systematic statement of principles and generalizations that provides for a framework for understanding how and why people change as they grow older. In other words, theories explain things, and developmental theories explain how and why we change as we grow older. One theory of human development is psychoanalytic theory, who I'm sure you've heard of. Was developed by Sigmund Freud, okay, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This is a theory of human development that holds that irrational, unconscious drives and motives, often originating in childhood, underlie human behavior. So the key features of the psychoanalytic theory are that most of our drives are unconscious and that they originate in childhood, and that most of our behavior as humans is a result of unconscious forces that are a result of things that happen to us in childhood. Erik Erikson, he learned from Freud, but had some disagreements with Freud, and he developed a different theory known as the psychosocial theory of development, characterized by 8 development stages, each characterized by a challenging developmental crisis. And his first 5 stages built upon Freud's theory, but he also described some adult stages. So one of the big differences in these theories, in addition to the social emphasis of Erikson's theory, is that Freud didn't really talk about adult development very much because he thought that most of development was a product of factors that had been influenced by childhood. Erikson believed that we continue to develop as adults and that we continue to go through these struggles as adults. So this is a table that summarizes the different theoretical orientations of Freud, the psychosexual theory of development, and Erikson, as I mentioned, the psychosocial theory of development. And you can see these. This is table 1.3 in your textbook. It's a good summarization of the comparison and contrasting of the different stages. So take a look at that. Behaviorism, this is another theory of human development that studies observable behavior. That was the key addition that the behaviorists added to other theories, was the focus on what was observable. It's also called learning theory because it describes the laws and the processes by which behavior is learned. And learning is often described using this term here, conditioning. According to behaviorism, conditioning is the processes by which responses become linked to particular stimuli, and this is how learning takes place, because we learn to associate a specific response to a specific stimulus. Two different types of conditioning. The first type, called classical conditioning, developed by Ivan Pavlov, also referred to as responding conditioning. This is the process in which a person or animal learns to associate a neutral stimulus with a meaningful stimulus, gradually reacting to the neutral stimulus with the same response as to the meaningful one. So you might recall the example of Pavlov's dog learning to salivate to the sound of a bell when it was paired repeatedly with a food stimulus. Operant conditioning, which was expanded upon and developed thoroughly by B.F. Skinner, also referred to as instrumental conditioning. It's a type of learning in which a particular action is followed either by something desired, which makes the person or animal more likely to repeat the action, or by something unwanted, which makes the person less likely to repeat that action. Okay, that's also referred to as reinforcement and punishment. Okay. Here is a table that compares psychoanalytic theory and behaviorism. Again, another table right out of the textbook. Take a look at that when you get a chance. It's a good summarization once again. Okay, another theory is social learning theory, developed by Albert Bandura. This was really an extension of behaviorism, but emphasized the influence that other people have over a person's behavior. So I just mentioned mirror neurons a few minutes ago. Well, mirror neurons respond when we watch other people do things, and our brains respond as if we were doing them. That's one of the ways that we learn how to mimic other people. Albert Bandura referred to this process as modeling, that people learn by observing other people and then copying them. He also talked about self-efficacy, which is how effective people think they are when it comes to changing themselves or altering their social context. Okay, a cognitive theorist, Jean Piaget, he talked about how thoughts and expectations profoundly affect action. Cognitive theory focuses on the changes in how people think over time. So, for instance, Jean Piaget, he believed that children, they don't think like miniature adults. They think in qualitatively different ways than adults do. And what I mean by qualitatively different is that it's not as if children just don't think as well as older adults do. It's that they think in a very different way than adults do. And Piaget talked about these 4 stages that we pass through in cognitive development. The specific stages are the sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational stages. Again, table 1.5 in your textbook it presents a good summarization of the different aspects of these stages that we progress through in terms of our cognitive development. Now, 2 key processes that Piaget talked about in terms of cognitive development are assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when new experiences are interpreted to fit into or assimilate with old ideas. These old ideas can also be referred to as schemas. A schema is kind of this it's a mental structure, but what we mean when we talk about schemas is it's a way that we organize things and make sense of the world. Um, and sometimes an experience will fit with something that we already believe. Other times, it won't. And when we incorporate new things into previously existing schemas without changing them, that's assimilation. When we change ideas or restructure them to include or accommodate new experiences, we call this process accommodation. And of course, Piaget believed that assimilation and accommodation of schemas are the main ways that development takes place.